Nothing really went the way anybody anticipated for the Ohio State running backs a year ago. And that makes a review challenging. And it also makes a preview very difficult as well for the Buckeyes. Welcome to The Beat. It is position review preview season on the Austin Birm Show, presented by the Waterworks. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. And even the good stuff, even the Bo Jackson rise, the Isaiah West emergence at times as a secondary option, some of the, qualified success of CJ Donaldson wasn't really anticipated. So when I think back to the 2025 Ohio State backfield, I still don't even know what to make of it, Berm.
No, it's weird because, again, we've talked about this with other, a little bit throughout the last couple months. But when you think about the 2025 season and everything we thought about the way the running game would go, it went exactly the opposite. I mean, we went into last spring expecting there to be a huge leap from James Peoples, a competition between him and CJ Donaldson to see who was going to be the primary guy. We heard a number of times last spring, like, hey, don't forget Bo Jackson. Hey, don't forget Bo Jackson. And everyone rightfully was like, okay, whatever. We'll talk about Bo Jackson in a year. That was wrong. Bo Jackson was right. And, I think the interesting thing is that it is a reminder that crowning anybody at any position, unless you're like a Jeremiah Smith type or a Caleb Downs, is really kind of fruitless these days because there are so many moving parts and so many pieces to how a guy can make an impact or how he's going to be utilized or things that we just don't know until we see it, that sometimes like you think, well, this is the next guy. It's the natural progression. It's the perfect player to take over here. And then they're just irrelevant. And I mean, that conversation happened a few times with few other positions last year as well. But I mean, today we're talking running back. So you have to start with the surprise of the year was not Bo Jackson's emergence to me. It was that James Peoples didn't. Like that to me was the biggest surprise.
Maybe I'll change my mind as we roll along here and get closer to spring ball, but I feel like running back evaluation for a year ago and also getting ready for spring ball, knowing that Bo Jackson and Isaiah West are injured and are not going to participate, I think it's the hardest one both to evaluate and to project for 2026. And part of that is because of what we saw in 2025 and what you just mentioned, because the roller coaster started in February and we spent the 2 months getting ready for spring ball. It's like, James Peoples, this is his time. This is what's going to happen. You saw the flashes in 2024. He was just stuck behind two really good backs in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. And by the way, wasn't that easy to replace their experience in two early round draft picks on the fly. As much as we thought that could happen, it certainly didn't to the level we anticipated. And then you got to, the first week, 2 weeks of spring ball, and people were saying, look out for CJ Donaldson. He's lost 25 pounds and he's running like the Flash and he's going to make a big impact. You guys are talking too much about James Peoples. And then we got to the end of spring ball and it was like, hey, here comes James Peoples. Now you guys are talking about too much about CJ Donaldson. And it just, maybe in the moment, and maybe that was too charitable of a reading, it was like, well, that's great because maybe they will both reach these heights that allow you to replace Quinshon and Travion without missing a beat. And that didn't happen. And it's great that Bo Jackson stepped up the way he did. It's great that the flashes of Isaiah West happened. But I think last year was a reminder when we talk about how straightforward and simple the tailback position can be and that you can make an immediate impact as a true freshman. And we did see some of that with Bo Jackson. The level of experience and ability to handle the contact and physical maturation, mental maturation that both Quinshon and Travion had wound up being, I think, too much for Ohio State to actually replace in the moment.
Yeah, but I mean, is that our fault? I think probably a little because maybe we underestimated the impact of those guys in 2024 because there was so much conversation about Will Howard and how he became the leader and Jeremiah Smith and the passing game with Emeka Ibuka and Carnell Tate. And the Buckeyes, when you go back to that playoff run, it really was like the first time all year where the run game decided that it was going to take over in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, there were obviously the home run plays, the Jeremiah against Oregon, and that sort of set the tone. But those games, the Buckeyes broke the back of Oregon. They broke the back of Texas with the running backs, with Travion Henderson on the 75-yard screen, with Travion Henderson on the 64-yard touchdown run against Oregon at the end of the first quarter that essentially wiped out the Ducks. I mean, when you think about the Tennessee game, it was 3 touchdowns on the ground in that game from the Buckeyes. It was another long Travion Henderson touchdown run. That ability, the explosive home run ability out of the running back position, is what allowed the Ohio State passing game to get loose and to get to the point where it could be not just like a requirement for Ohio State, but it was a compliment. And when you think about Travion and Quinshon heading into the spring, we're like, oh, well, those guys were both pretty good. But like 2 picks in the top 40 in the NFL draft is not just pretty good. Like that's really good. Like that's really, really good. And so to expect plug and play replacements for 2 guys who are borderline first round picks was probably misguided and myopic on our part, because I think you just have to start to realize that, especially for like guys who hadn't had the opportunity before. James Peoples had 100 carries as a freshman. CJ Donaldson was coming in from West Virginia. Bo Jackson was coming in from high school. Isaiah West from high school. Like, to just assume that, oh, well, it'll just be a nice, easy plug and play. I think underestimated and underappreciated what Travion and Quinshon actually provided in 24. And I won't make that mistake again.
I want to be clear that I don't look back at 2025 and view the tailback room as a negative for the team. I don't think it was bad. I think based on the standard that we're evaluating it against, Quinshon and Travion, they didn't meet it. But like CJ Donaldson still exceeded what I thought were reasonable expectations when he came in. I thought he was just going to be a short yardage back. And that was pretty much it. He proved that he could actually be a starting caliber Big Ten back. Now, did he have limitations? Did he have a ceiling? Yeah, he did, but he played a lot more. And also the runs that he provided, especially against Miami, like imagine if they didn't have CJ Donaldson's presence in that game, what that could have looked like. And would I have liked to have seen Bo Jackson and CJ Donaldson make a guy miss, and some of those things that were blocked up better against both Indiana and Miami? Could they have, done a little bit more? Would Quinshon and Travion have hit them? Can't prove it. That's a hypothetical, but my guess is that they could, because we had seen them do that in playoff games before. But you can go through the list. Like James Peoples had moments where he did not pack it in after he was passed on the depth chart, and he had the hurdle touchdown and kept on grinding and showed that maybe if he had played one more year at Ohio State, he could have had a more prominent role. Certainly Ohio State was not building a plan around him, but Bo Jackson certainly exceeded what I thought he was going to be capable of, because at this time a year ago, I didn't even know if he'd participate in spring camp coming off those injuries, or if you could count on him to get through a full year based on what he had done and not done in high school. On down the list, like all of these guys had bright spots. None of them were a drag on the Ohio State offense, but they didn't propel it to the heights that we had seen the year before, which is why when we get to the preview part, it gets even more complicated, because Donaldson is gone, James Peoples is gone, Sam Dixon is gone, and Bo Jackson is hurt, and Isaiah West is hurt recovering, I should say, from off-season surgery. So like now you're talking about a year where you're banking on those top 2 in West and Jackson and Arthur Smith to come in and upgrade the ground game, and they're not going to be on the field at all in March and April.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with an Ohio State staffer like a week after the Miami game, and the first thing that I was told was that we have to seriously upgrade the running game. And I'm like, well, I don't know that you need to upgrade the running game, because it wasn't bad. It just didn't hit home runs last year. And that is a distinction, I think, that is important, because that was the difference in the Ohio State offense from the year before. It was the home run threat of Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. There were so many times in 2025 when Bo Jackson had a seam and a gap that you're like, oh, if he can a hole, like just one more guy he has to make miss. And that's the type of stuff that you will learn from experience. That's the type of thing that as you get bigger and stronger and healthier in college football, like those things will turn into home runs for Bo Jackson. But in the meantime, last year, it eliminated the opportunity for Ohio State to really open up things in the run game the way that they wanted. They had 21 rushing touchdowns as a team. Bo Jackson averaged over 6 yards a carry. James Peoples just under 5.7 yards a carry. Isaiah West over 5 yards a carry. I know that CJ Donaldson wasn't asked to be that guy, but you still don't want to know, or you still don't want to you don't want to just concede that your secondary running option, your guy who had the second most carries on your team, is going to average less than 4 yards a carry. I understand he's a different style of back than the other guys were, but 4 yards a carry or less at Ohio State is not good enough. And so when you look at what CJ Donaldson did, and he had 10 touchdowns, he was really valuable in the pass protection, he did a lot of the other things right. But the stark difference between what the running backs looked like when CJ was getting the ball and what it looked like when the other guys were getting the ball, I think was pretty prominent. And the difference is that Ohio State obviously needed what CJ Donaldson did provide better than the other guys, at times more than they needed more yards on the ground, because they always can just go get the yards elsewhere. So it's like you almost have to just be content with saying, well, it's okay if we only get 3.5 yards a carry, because at least this guy's going to pass pro. At least he's not going to fumble. And that's a weird way to do it, I guess, in my mind, because I think that was a clear decision Ohio State made at times last year.
Well, I mean, yards
especially in the red zone. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I was saying. The yards per carry were going to be skewed because CJ Donaldson's his role became clearly defined inside the 5, and his numbers were he scored a lot of touchdowns, but the yards per carry were going to be limited, especially because it was obvious to everyone in the building, whatever building they were in, that once you put him in there and you had 3 or 4 tight ends in front of him, what was coming. And yes, I know that there was criticisms about his pad level and ability to finish off some of the short yardage runs. I get it. I'm not going to try and paint a different picture for CJ Donaldson's impact. He was not a Quinshon or Travion caliber running back. He was also, when he was brought in, I don't think anybody anticipated he was going to have to be a starter for Ohio State. And he wound up becoming that by week 1 against Texas. And even a month later, when Bo Jackson had taken that mantle on, there were still conversations right here on the beat presented by the Waterworks about well, is Bo going to be able to maintain possession of the football? Is the ball security where you need it? Because you had 2, not high leverage, but meaningful fumbles that we had seen in the first half of the season. And that was the conversation about entrusting him to be the primary running back. And you saw that when other guys were on the field in terms of blitz pickup and pass protection. So that's none of that. I don't mean it as a criticism of any single one of them. And the fact that very few tailbacks anywhere in the country could have come in and given you exactly what Quinshon and Travion provided. But to win a national championship, Ohio State did need more than it got, and it's going to have to figure out how to tap into that more with this, again, revamped room heading into another year with Carlos Locklyn.
Yeah, it was just such a weird season with the run game because you had so many guys splitting the reps. Do you know how many games CJ Donaldson had double-digit carries last year for Ohio State?
I don't think it was more than 5, right?
It was 3.
Yeah.
Texas, which was his season high in carries, 19 carries against the Longhorns in the season opener, 13 against Illinois, and 14 against Michigan. Those games, he averaged 3.35 yards a carry, 3.38 yards a carry, and 3.1 yards a carry. But those are the games that he got the most carries because it was we're going to be okay with just letting him be a hammer here in those situations. And what you got was a team that seemed content at times. Once they realized they didn't have home run hitters in the backfield, I think they just decided, let's figure out how to best hammer people with these guys. And it didn't always make sense when you got down into the red zone and you weren't giving the ball to Bo at the end of the year or Isaiah, because those are the guys that had the better vision and the better opportunity to get in the end zone. It's just, I don't think that will be the case this year. And I think that is the reality for Ohio State. Nobody expected CJ Donaldson, as you said, to be a starter. He was brought in to be a complementary piece. And so when you start to look at, hey, how did the transfer portal class do? Did these guys live up to the hype? Did they live up to the expectations? For what CJ Donaldson was brought in for, he absolutely lived up to the hype. What he ended up being turned into, he did not. And so I think it's hard to give a fair, objective view on what his actual addition meant, because the fact is you needed a leader in that room. You had James Peoples as a second-year running back who was your veteran. So you needed something a lot different out of CJ than what Ohio State got out of him. And I think he provided that stuff, but just not the stuff on the field that you were hoping to get once you determined midway through the summer, hey, this guy might be our starting running back. So That's not going to be the case this year, and Ohio State's making changes. I'm making changes. Austin, do you know that I had boneless wings on Monday?
I saw you, and I was like, whoa. I wanted to give you a huge congratulations for making it to maintenance and just diving right back into some Roosters wings.
I'm into maintenance mode on Awaken 180. I have lost over 35 pounds in 8 weeks on the program. I feel great. I'm into the part where now I can start to take what I learned with my coach, Mandy, and apply it to like my normal eating habits. It's been actually pretty easy. I have not gained a pound since I went into maintenance mode. That's important because I've learned a lot of things. I know how to better eat. I know how to better plan my day. I know how to better prepare for what my wife and I need to have around the house. And I feel great. Go to awaken180weightloss.com and join us because I'm telling you folks, it's worth it. Thinking ahead, right? You look at this room now, and as you already mentioned, the fact is you are missing Bo Jackson and Isaiah West who go into spring and with like, you guys better be ready to go because we're going to need you real bad. And they're not there. And so what the hell do you do heading into this year's spring football, knowing that you have three? I don't even know that Favor Aki's able to go, to be honest, full speed, because he was in a boot when I saw him last in December. So like this gets real weird for the Buckeyes in spring.
It does, because we already knew that Bo Jackson had that offseason surgery that came to light during the contract negotiations in January. We didn't know. And I think I talked about it when we were discussing winter workout people. Like, well, Isaiah West is entering a critical phase. If Bo Jackson can't take those reps, he's going to be the next in line. Well, I didn't know about the nature of his own offseason surgery. So he's going to be out. Ryan Day confirmed that on his coach's show last week, the first time he had talked publicly in a month. So he said both of those guys are out. And then I went further and I'm looking at this like, okay, who is going to manage this? Arthur Smith is coming in to enhance the ground game. Carlos Locklyn needs to take the next step with this running back group. It is revamped because you're losing CJ Donaldson, James Peoples, and Sam Dixon, as we mentioned. Well, Jacoby Jackson, I don't know the status of his and the severity of his injury. He only played in the first 4 games for Florida, so he's coming off of a setback that forced him to file an appeal for an additional year of eligibility as he arrived via the transfer portal for Ohio State. You are, looking at Turbo Rogers. He missed all of his freshman season due to injury. I would assume that he's closer to a return maybe than any of these guys, but I don't know that for sure. Those are ostensibly the top 4 guys on the Ohio State depth chart. Is it a be-all, end-all that you participate in March and April? Can you make up that time in training camp? Of course you can. But if Ohio State is trying to change its ground game and trying to build these calluses and build experience and acclimate Bo Jackson and Isaiah West into the starting lineup, or bring along Jacoby Jackson, or get Turbo Rogers into the mix, or work in Legend Bay, who I didn't think was going to be a major factor, is some of his hybrid weapon, dual threat wide receiver running back, or Favor Aki, as you mentioned. Like, I don't know how healthy or ready any of those 6 people are right now. So previewing spring ball in February, I'm like, well, I don't know. And I didn't know a year ago because we got all that wrong.
Well, that's the weird thing. Like, I think whatever we see in spring ball may have absolutely zero relevance to what the Ohio State run game looks like in the summer or in training camp in August, because you're going to see Turbo Rogers and Legend Bay presumably getting the majority of the work, because I would expect, and I have not confirmed this, but based on what was talked about when Jacoby Jackson was being recruited in the transfer portal, I think that he should be good to go. But he's also heading into year 7. He's had some injury issues. Maybe you don't push it too hard with him because of the fact that you're going to need him to be the guide for Legend and for Turbo and for Favor if Favor's ready to go. Again, he was in a walk. He got hurt on the first play of his senior season and did not play the rest of the year, and was still in a boot and having discussions about surgery when I saw him in December before signing day. So it is a really weird situation. And I don't think that you're going to see Arthur Smith and Tyler Bowen be able to really put together the run game plan that Ohio State will use during the season once the spring happens, because you're going to be using the gadget guys, the Turbo Rogers and the Legend Bays, almost as your primary ball carriers in the spring. So, like, where's TC Caffey when you need him? You know what I mean? Like, where's that dude? Because Ohio State's going to need to go like 5 deep at running back in spring. and it's going to have to be 3 walk-ons, I think, because I don't think these other guys are going to play. So it does make for an interesting opportunity, I think, for Turbo and for Legend, especially because those guys are so unique and so different in their skill sets than the other guys that maybe it gives Ohio State an opportunity to see something and go, hey, this is a plan we can play with. Legend Bay, I think, is going to play. If you listen to the way that Ryan Day discussed him on his coach's show on Friday last week, like that's a lot of praise for a young guy that Ohio State really wasn't sure how they were going to fit him in. He's got Ted Ginn's speed, but he has like Curtis Samuel's size. I don't know if he's as big, but I also don't know if he's experienced in the run game. This is a guy who played quarterback in high school. Like there's a lot of different ways that he can be used. I don't know that any of it is relevant to what Ohio State will roll out in September.
Yeah, or relevant to get through March and April, because if, I think the comparison that I remember, and there were a lot of them being made about Legend Bay, was like Tyreek Hill speed, and you don't necessarily want to line him up as your Big Ten bell cow running back, and you certainly don't want to run him into a wall, an inside drill during March and April. I mean, as certainly not as a true freshman. So it's hard for me to even factor that into this conversation for spring camp. And maybe there's a limit to what we can actually learn about the run game in March and April anyway. I don't. The end result of all of this is we don't know what those practices are going to look like, who's fully healthy, who's limited, who's going to do what. But, how much full contact tackling to the ground, how much of the run game installation for Arthur Smith is actually going to occur in spring. Because I don't think that, no one is expressing any concerns. Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, they could use these reps, but part of the reason that they're not getting them is because they got scars by actually playing in real games last year. So I don't think they would trade that experience that got them hurt just to have them healthy to go through spring ball, which ultimately is not going to make any difference for them. Those reps last year are going to be more meaningful getting them into August and September anyway. So no one is concerned about it. And the nature of these injuries, we don't think any of them will last beyond, June and July or keep them out of training camp. So eventually they're all going to be fully healthy. Would you like to have those snaps in March and April? Of course you would. Is it going to be a deal breaker, as I said earlier? No, I don't think so at all.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways where Arthur Smith's involvement here is kind of unique, because if you look at what he had to deal with in Pittsburgh last year as the Steelers offensive coordinator, the Steelers' second leading rusher on that team there, as far as carries and yards go, was Kenneth Gainwell, who's a 5'9", 200-pound former Turbo Rogers Legend Bay type of player who actually, became somewhat productive for the Steelers. And I think that you can take some of the stuff you saw with Kenneth Gainwell and how the Steelers used him and maybe extrapolate it to Turbo and Legend as you head into spring. But again, I don't know what that means for Jacoby Jackson. I don't know what it means for Favor Aki, because the Steelers' other running back is Jalen Warren, who was 5'8", 215 pounds. So they're using that same type of player as a running back. So we'll see what Arthur Smith can come up with. But that's why it's going to be so fascinating when we get a chance to sit down and pick Arthur Smith's brain for the first time, because this spring it has nothing to do with what this run game is going to look like in the season. And I don't know how a coach walking into a new situation, how do you wrap your mind around that? How do you wrap your mind around saying, okay, well, these are all the guys I'm going to get to work with over these next 7 weeks, and then none of them are going to matter because what? How does that then force him to make those guys matter? Do you then have to force them to play offense in the spring in the style that you think Bo Jackson and Isaiah West would? Or does Isaiah West and Bo Jackson have to then morph their game to fit the style that you deploy in the spring with the Turbo and Legend situation? So I don't understand it at all. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have a beat on it, because I've not yet spoken to Arthur Smith. The entire coaching staff pretty much for Ohio State is on vacation this week, except for, from what I understand, Keenan Bailey and Arthur Smith, who are in the building working on the offense. So we just got to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. And this is probably the most least instructive, position preview in the history of position previews, because we have no clue how this is actually going to play out when the season starts. And some of that is because I'm fearful of how it went last year. Some of it's because you look at these guys and you're like, what? This doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, I did anticipate it would be the most difficult position review preview that we would have to.
They're
get
good
through.
players, though.
No doubt. I don't think there's a lack of talent. I don't think there's a lack of coaching acumen. I think the pieces are all in place. We're just not going to know how that puzzle actually looks for several months, which will be frustrating. And by the time we get to like a pre-training camp, spring review preview, we'll probably still be fumbling around in the dark about what that's going to look like. But we're going to keep trying because that's the most important thing, Birm. And as this calendar is going fast, and we've only done 2 position groups on February 4th. So we're going to have to add another one for Thursday. I'll try and still incorporate a third thought into
Happy
whatever.
signing day, though, to everyone.
Yeah. Remember when that was a busy day for you?
No, I don't, because it seems like it was so long ago. It was a whole lifetime ago. But Ohio State will sign a kicker from a preferred walk-on kicker on Wednesday.
Do you have to actually sign a preferred walk-on?
I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, we've had this conversation before. Why do any walk-ons have to be in the transfer portal? Like,
I mean,
that's stupid.
They should always be in the transfer portal.
Right. They should perpetually be in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Like, why should they not be?
Well, a happy signing day to you. I bet you're relieved that you don't have to get up at 4 a.m. to get down to Columbus to start covering it. We will. 3 thoughts Thursday. That sounds like a tight ends day, perhaps.
I don't know. We'll have to discuss that. There's a linear quality to the positions of football, and we've done quarterbacks and running back. I think the next one has to be wide receiver, but we'll let America decide. Also, America, the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com is where you put in your questions for, Friday foursome. So we're already moving towards that. So start putting them in now.
Time slows down for no program, no man, and no episode of The Beat on the Austin and Birm Show. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday. Maybe you've got a better read on the Ohio State running back situation than we do, and please let us know if so, because we would very much like that clarity. But we'll try again with the wide receivers. Birm has already said it will be so. That will be on Thursday. Get those questions in for the Friday mailbag, the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. He is Birm, and I am Austin, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.